Beggar woman stopped the Mafia boss at the door. Your car's wired. It'll explode if you start it. The sleet came down in ice-flecked daggers, a liquid cold that found every gap in Lila's worn-out coat. She was huddled in a granite alcove that offered the illusion of shelter, but none of the reality. Her world had shrunk to this 3-foot space, a patch of dry, wind-scarred pavement between a high-end jeweler and a steam vent. Across the street, Varelli's was closing. Lila watched it every night. The restaurant was a beacon of impossible warmth, a moving painting of rich, laughing people. The valets, sleek as seals in their black raincoats, were jogging back and forth, bringing around cars that cost more than a human life, or at least, more than hers. Her stomach was a cold, hollow ache. Hunger was an old friend, but the cold was a cruel enemy, stealing the feeling from her fingers, her toes, and finally, her hope. She was a ghost in wet wool, invisible to the world. And that was why she was the only one who saw the man. He didn't belong, he wasn't a valet, and he wasn't a customer. He was a shadow, moving with a quick, compressed energy. He wore a dark coat and a brimmed hat pulled low, and he walked with a purpose that set Lila's teeth on edge. He didn't go to the restaurant door. He went to the street, to the car parked right in front, a black Mercedes sedan that gleamed like polished obsidian under the streetlights. It was the only car not parked by the valets, sitting in the red-painted curb zone, a boss's car. The man crouched, not kneeling, but in a low, athletic squat. He was at the driver's side front wheel, and Lila saw his arm extend, something small and dark in his hand. There was a faint, metallic click, a sound that the sleet should have swallowed, but didn't. He slid back, stood up, and cast one quick, sweeping glance up and down the street. Lila pressed herself so far into the alcove she felt the granite bite into her back. He didn't see her. No one ever saw her. The man turned. Not running, but walking with that same terrifying speed, and vanished around the corner into the gray, swirling misery of the night. Lila's heart was a cold fist in her chest. She should stay put. She should do nothing. The first rule of the street, the only rule, was to stay invisible. To be seen was to be moved, to be hurt, to be erased. Whatever she saw, it was not her business. It was rich people's business, and that was the most dangerous kind. But her instinct, a rusted, long dormant thing, was screaming. It wasn't just a theft. It wasn't vandalism. The way he moved, the economy of his motion, the precise spot under the chassis. It was wrong. It was a sickness in her gut. The brass and glass doors of Varelli's swung open, spilling a wave of light and heat and the smell of oregano and old wine. The sound of laughter followed, loud and male. A man was emerging. He was not just a man. He was an event. His suit was the color of a midnight sky, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His dark hair was slicked back from a strong, unforgiving face. He was power, condensed and lethal, even from across the street. Lila could feel the dangerous coldness that rolled off him, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. He was flanked by 2 boulders in silk suits, their eyes moving, scanning, missing nothing except the ghost and the bomb. Lila's feet moved before her brain could stop them. It was a stupid, suicidal impulse, the act of a person who had forgotten the rules. She stumbled from her alcove, her frozen legs protesting, and launched herself into the street. A taxi blared its horn, skidding on the wet pavement, its headlights blinding her. "Hey!" She made it to the curb just as the man was about to step off it. One of his bodyguards, the one on the left, a man with a broken nose and a neck as thick as a tree trunk, stepped in her path. His arm came up, a solid wall of muscle. "Get lost, rat!" Lila was frantic, her voice a raw croak. "No, wait, please." She tried to sidestep him, to get to the man in the center, the man who owned the car. The bodyguard grabbed the front of her coat, the wet wool bunching in his fist. "I said beat it. The boss ain't got time for—" "Please," she choked out, looking past the guard, her eyes fixed on the boss. Dominic Varelli looked at her, and his gaze was worse than the bodyguard's shove. It was pure, icy dismissal. He saw her not as a person, but as grit in the mechanism of his evening. He had already turned away. A flicker of annoyance on his perfect, cruel mouth. "Rocco, handle it," he said, his voice a low baritone that cut through the rain. Lila was desperate. She lunged, slipping from the bodyguard's grip and grabbing at the sleeve of Dominic's $1,000 suit. It was a fatal mistake. The bodyguard named Rocco moved. He didn't just grab her. He seized her arm and twisted. Lila cried out, a sharp, thin sound, as her shoulder screamed in protest. He slammed her back against the restaurant's brick wall, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. "Don't touch the boss." Dominic had stopped. He turned back slowly. And it was in that second, with her face pressed to the cold, wet brick, that Lila finally spoke the words. "Your car," she gasped. The words scraped from her throat. "Your car, it's wired." The world stopped. The sleet, the traffic, the distant city hum, everything fell away. Rocco's grip on her arm didn't loosen, but he froze. Dominic Varelli's cold, gray steel eyes locked on hers. The annoyance was gone. In its place was an absolute, terrifying stillness. "What did you say?" "The man," she panted, tasting blood and rain. "A man. He put something under it. Driver's side. He just left." Dominic's gaze didn't waver from her face, but he spoke to his other man, the one who hadn't moved, Matteo, the driver's side, front wheel well. "Check it." Matteo looked skeptical, but the boss had spoken. He pulled a small, powerful flashlight from his pocket and bent down, disappearing for a moment. Lila watched Dominic's face. He was watching hers, dissecting her, searching for the lie. A long second passed. Matteo stood up, his face pale under the streetlight. He looked at Dominic, and he didn't say a word. He just gave a terse, sick nod. The air went out of the world. Dominic's hand moved so fast Lila almost missed it. He grabbed Rocco's shoulder. "Get her in the other car, now." Lila's panic, which had been a cold stone, now exploded. This was it. This was what she got for breaking the rule. She was a witness, a loose end. "No," she screamed, again struggling against Rocco's iron grip. "No, I told you, I helped you. Let me go." Rocco didn't listen. He lifted her, his strength effortless and insulting, and half dragged, half carried her toward a black SUV parked 50 feet down the street. He wrenched the back door open and threw her inside like a bag of wet garbage. The door slammed shut, sealing her in darkness and the suffocating, clean smell of new leather. She scrambled into the farthest corner of the seat, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might break. She was trapped. She had run from the rain and into the ocean. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. The SUV was as silent as a tomb. Finally, the passenger door opened. Lila flinched, pressing herself against the window, but it was Dominic Varelli. He didn't sit in the front. He got into the back, sitting on the opposite bench seat, facing her. The dome light flashed on, illuminating the space between them, then clicked off, plunging them back into shadow. But she could see him, his silhouette backlit by the streetlights. The car was his territory. His voice was low, smooth, and terrifying. It wrapped around her in the dark. "Who sent you?" "Nobody," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Nobody? I just saw him. I saw him." "You expect me to believe you," he said. Not a question, but a statement. A beggar. Just happened to see a professional and decided to play hero? "I'm not a hero," she shot back, a flash of her old self, her angry self, cutting through the fear. I know what wrong looks like." "Who sent you?" "Look at me," she cried, and she spread her hands. They were filthy, the nails broken, the skin cracked and bleeding. "What do I have to gain? If I was part of it, why would I stop you? If I wanted money, I would have asked for it. I don't know you. I don't want to know you. I just saw the man. And he looked wrong. He was silent. He just watched her. She could feel his gaze, a physical weight in the dark. He was a man who lived in a world of lies, and he was searching her for the one he knew had to be there. He was looking for the fear of a co-conspirator, but all he found was the raw, animal terror of the prey. "What did he look like?" he asked, his voice a fraction softer. Lila swallowed, her throat raw. Dark coat, hat, tall. He moved. Fast. Not running, but fast. He knew exactly where to go. It was efficient. Dominic leaned forward, his face emerging from the shadow. His eyes were chips of ice. He held her gaze for a full 10 seconds, then he nodded. Once, to himself. He had made a decision. He reached into the breast pocket of his perfect suit. Lila flinched, convinced he was pulling a gun. He pulled out a plastic key card. He didn't give it to her. He knocked on the partition and the driver's window slid open. Rocco was at the wheel. "Grand Regent, room 1204, Dominic said. He handed the card to Rocco. "Take her. Get her clean clothes, get her food. Post someone outside the door. Nobody in, nobody out. Understand? Boss, you sure?" Rocco's voice was a low rumble of doubt. "Just do it." Lila was trembling, overwhelmed with confusion. "What? Why? I told you. I'll go. I won't say anything. I don't know anything." Dominic turned his head, and for the first time, he looked at her as if she were a person, a broken, pathetic, and very complicated person. "You saw the man," he said, his voice flat, "and he might have seen you. You're a loose end, and people in my world don't like loose ends." He opened the door and stepped out into the sleet, his suit somehow still perfect. He paused, one hand on the door, and looked back at her. "You're not safe on the streets anymore." The door slammed shut. The ride to the Grand Regent was silent. Lila was on one side, Rocco on the other. He didn't speak to her. He didn't even look at her. She was cargo. A different bodyguard, this one built like a refrigerator, met them at the service elevator. He escorted her up to the 12th floor. The hallway was silent, the carpet so thick it absorbed all sound. He used the key card, pushed open the door to room 1204, and shoved her gently inside. "Stay," he said. The door clicked shut. The lock, a heavy, electronic thunk, echoed in the silence. Lila stood, dripping on a plush beige carpet. The room was massive. A king-size bed, a mountain of white linen and pillows, dominated the space. A sitting area, a desk, a television as big as her old apartment wall. The air was warm. It was so warm, it felt heavy, oppressive, and it was quiet. The silence was a roar, a stark contrast to the constant, grinding noise of the street. She took a step. Her wet boot squelched on the carpet. She looked down, horrified, at the dirty water she'd left. She backed away, shedding her coat, her gloves, her sodden layers, leaving them in a pile by the door. She was in a thin, torn sweater and jeans that were stiff with grime. She touched the bed, just with one finger. The comforter was impossibly soft. She hadn't slept on a mattress in 841 days. She knew the exact number. She drifted into the bathroom. It was bigger than her alcove, a cave of marble and gold-plated fixtures. She caught her reflection in the massive mirror and recoiled. A drowned animal stared back at her, a gaunt, hollow-eyed creature with matted hair and dirt on her high cheekbones. The shower was a glass box. She turned the knob, and hot water, actual scalding hot water, burst from the nozzle. She cried out, a small, pained sound as the heat hit her frozen skin. It was an agony, a beautiful, painful, shocking agony. She stood under the spray for a minute, then an hour, scrubbing off years of grime, watching the water run brown, then gray, then finally, mercifully, clear. When she got out, she found clothes laid on the bed. They hadn't been there before. Someone must have come in while she was in the shower. The thought sent a fresh chill of fear through her. Black sweatpants, a gray, long-sleeved t-shirt, white socks, anonymous, clean, impossibly soft. A knock came at the door. She froze. "Food?" a gruff voice called. She waited. A moment later, a silver tray was pushed inside, and the door clicked shut again. Roast chicken, a roll with butter, a bowl of thick, steaming soup, a bottle of water. She didn't sit at the desk. She sat on the floor, her back to the wall, and ate like a wolf. She tore the chicken with her hands, her body shaking with the sudden, violent intake of calories. She drank the entire bottle of water without breathing. She was clean, she was fed, and she was warm. She should have been relieved. She was terrified. She was too exhausted to get under the covers, too scared to dirty the perfect white sheets. She curled up on the small sofa in the sitting area, pulling a decorative throw blanket over her. Sleep, deep and black and dreamless, claimed her instantly. She woke to a sound, a faint, sharp click. Not the door lock, the sound of a heavy glass being set on a wooden table. Her eyes snapped open. He was there. Dominic Varelli was sitting in the armchair by the window, not 10 feet from her. The city lights of Ravenport, a glittering diamond tapestry, framed him like a dark halo. He had a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He hadn't just arrived. He'd been watching her. Lila scrambled up, clutching the t-shirt, her heart leaping into her throat. How did you get in?" she whispered. "It's my hotel," he said, his voice a low, calm rumble in the dark. He said it like he owned the rain, the sleet, the city itself. The air in the room was thick, charged. She was a mouse, and the lion had come to her cage. "You're clean," he observed. She just nodded, pulling the throw blanket tighter. "I need you to tell me again," he said. "Everything you saw, from the moment you noticed him." She told him. She told him about the hat, the coat, the way he crouched, the click. She told him the time. Just after 9. She told him the direction he'd gone. He listened. He didn't just listen to her words. He dissected her. He watched her body language, the flicker of her eyes. "You're observant," he said. "I have to be," she replied, her voice still rough. "It's how I stay alive. You said he was efficient. What did you mean?" Lila hesitated, thinking. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't looking around like a common thief. He knew the spot. He knew how much time he had. He was there and gone in. I don't know, 10 seconds? It was a job. Dominic sipped his drink. "How do you know about triggers? You said the car was wired. That's a specific word. This was the dangerous part. This was the part of her she kept buried. I used to work," she stammered, "in an office, a long time ago." "What kind of office?" His voice was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Tech," she said, looking at her hands. "Security, but not this kind, not bombs." She gestured vaguely. "Digital, firewalls, data encryption, penetration testing." "Penetration testing," he repeated, the words sounding strange and clinical in his mouth. "I looked for weaknesses," she explained, her voice gaining a fraction of its old confidence. "In systems, in code. I found the holes before the bad guys could. That's all." "And what happened?" Lila's face shut down. The small light that had entered her eyes was extinguished. She looked away from him, toward the dark window. The system won. A long silence settled between them, filled only by the distant, faint hum of the city. Lila was exhausted. The adrenaline, the food, the fear, and now this interrogation. Her eyelids were heavy. "You should sleep," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. On the bed?" she asked, like a child asking a complex question. "That's what it's for." She shook her head. "The couch is fine." She didn't want to owe him a bed. She didn't want to owe him anything. She curled up on the small sofa again, pulling the blanket to her chin. She was asleep in seconds, her face finally losing its hunted look. Dominic did not leave. He sat in the chair for another hour, nursing his drink, and watched her sleep. This woman was a complication, a witness, a problem. She was a ghost who had wandered out of her graveyard and into his war. He should be angry. He should be plotting how to dispose of her, how to make this loose end disappear. But he wasn't angry. He was intrigued. He was fascinated by her broken sharpness, by the intelligence in her eyes that had been buried under years of grime. She wasn't just a street rat, she was a mind. She was the only person in a city of millions who had seen the threat, and she was the only one stupid enough or brave enough to act. He watched the slow, steady rise and fall of her breathing. He felt something in his chest, a tight, unfamiliar pull. It wasn't just lust, she was a wreck. It was something colder, more primal, possessiveness. This woman, this ghost from the alley, had saved his life, and in doing so, she had tied her fate to his. Whether she knew it or not, she was his. He stood up, walking silently to the couch. He looked down at her face. pale and clean now, at the dark bruise already forming on her arm where Rocco had grabbed her. A low, slow burn of rage started in his gut, not at her, at the man who planted the bomb, at the system that had put her on the street, and at his own man for touching her. He left the room as silently as he had come, the heavy door clicking shut behind him. The image of her sleeping face, vulnerable and exhausted, was burned into his mind. This changed things. This changed everything. Dominic's office, 36 floors above the rain-slicked streets of Ravenport, was a tomb of glass and steel. For 2 days, he had barely slept. The bomb was not just an attack. It was an insult. It was intimate. It was one of us, he said, his voice a low, gravelly sound that filled the sterile room. He was standing in front of the window, not looking at the city, but at the reflection of the 2 men sitting behind him. "Boss, it's a hell of a leap," Matteo said, his consigliere, always the voice of reason. He was older, his suits less sharp, his face a roadmap of worry. "The Irish have been pushing at the port. It could be a message." "The Irish," Dominic said, turning around, "used dynamite and timers they bought from a catalog. This was a 2 megahertz, cellular-triggered C4 block. It was surgical. It was designed to kill me and leave the paint on the car next to me. The Irish are butchers. This was a surgeon." He walked to his desk and slammed his hand down on a tablet. A schematic of the restaurant's security system appeared. "And this," he growled. The camera feed overlooking the street looped for exactly 90 seconds. Not 60, not 120, 90. Just enough time for a man to get out of a car, walk over, plant the device, and walk away. Rocco, his second in command, the man who had thrown Lila against the wall, shifted in his chair. "A loop? That's high level. You need codes for that." "You need my codes," Dominic corrected, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You need the admin password, and only 3 people in this city have that." He looked at Matteo. He looked at Rocco. "Me, you." "And you?" The silence in the room was absolute. "We find the man she saw," Dominic said, his voice final. "We find him. We find who paid him. And we find out how they got my codes. Until then, no one is clean." Lila had been moved. The hotel was a cage, but it was a familiar one. The penthouse was a prison on a different planet. She had been escorted by Rocco, who still looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot, and left in a guest suite that was larger than the entire shelter she'd stayed in 2 winters ago. She was clean, she was fed, she was bored. The boredom was the worst part. It gave her time to think, time to feel the cold. Crawling terror return. She was a witness, a loose end, he'd called her. She was a pet rock in a den of wolves. She was pacing, wearing another set of anonymous, soft clothes, when Dominic entered the suite without knocking. "We're moving you," he said. Her heart seized. "Moving me where? Back to the street?" "My office." "Here." He led her from the guest wing to the main office, a room she hadn't seen yet. It was dominated by a desk, but one wall was a bank of monitors. Dark, black squares. "My security team is useless," he said, the statement flat, empty of emotion. "They're looking for gangsters. They're pulling mugshots. They're idiots. You," he said, pointing to her. "You're tech." "I was," she said, her voice small. "I told you. Firewalls, data." "The device," he said, cutting her off. "It was triggered by a cell phone. We have the pieces, but the SIM is fried. The trigger is dead." So, you're a hacker. You look for weaknesses. Find me one." A spark, tiny and cold, lit inside her. She hadn't been asked to solve a problem in years. "The device is dead," she said, thinking aloud, her feet moving her toward the monitors. "But the trigger isn't the device. It's the network. You don't need the SIM. You need the cell tower." A remote trigger device has to handshake with the nearest tower to get a signal. Even if the call never connected, the attempted handshake, the data ping, it's logged. Dominic and Rocco, who had been standing by the door, exchanged a look. Rocco looked confused. Dominic looked interested. "The phone companies won't just give you those logs," Dominic said. "You don't ask," Lila said. She turned to him, her eyes clearer than he'd ever seen them. You take them. You have the date, the time, and the location. I just need a terminal, a good one, and admin access to your network. I need to get outside your firewall." Dominic nodded. "Rocco, give her a terminal, the best one." Rocco led her to a small, glass-walled room off the main office, a single chair, a black desk, and a powerful-looking computer. "Don't get cute," Rocco warned, his voice a low threat. "He might be fooled. I'm not—" Lila didn't even look at him. She sat down. Her hands, clean now, hovered over the keyboard. She typed. The moment her fingers hit the keys, the world fell away. The penthouse, the danger, the man with the cold eyes, all of it gone. It was just her and the system. The muscle memory returned instantly. The rapid patter of keys, the flow of code, the hunt, and with the hunt, the memories came, unbidden and sharp. She was in a glass office, high above a different city. She was wearing a blue silk blouse and a pencil skirt. She was the best penetration tester at Atherton Gray. She was a genius. She saw the numbers, millions, just gone, siphoned, not stolen, moved in microtransactions, rerouted through shell accounts in 3 different countries, and landing in a private account, an account belonging to C-level executive, a man who had patted her on the back at the Christmas party. She brought it to her boss, Peterson. "Lila," he'd said, his smile tight. "You're a wizard. But this is a fantasy. You've misinterpreted the data." She knew she hadn't. She went to the board. Then the world ended. 2 days later, she was called into Human Resources. "Concerns about your stability," they'd said. An anonymous complaint. They'd found a psych evaluation in her records. She'd never had a psych evaluation. They were suspending her. She went to the press. A reporter, young and hungry, ran the story. Atherton Gray's response was not to deny the embezzlement. It was to destroy her. They leaked the evaluation. They produced emails, forged and fabricated, showing her demanding money from the executive. They painted her as a vindictive, unstable extortionist. She was fired. She was blacklisted. The tech world, which had been her kingdom, shut its gates, her credentials, her awards, her genius. All of it erased by the word unstable. Her savings lasted 6 months, her apartment 2 more, her friends 3 weeks. The shelter was next. Then the alcove. Lila's breath hitched. A dry, painful sob. She was staring at Dominic's server logs, but she was seeing her old life burn. She had been discredited, left destitute, because she had looked for a weakness and found one. She pressed the heels of her palms into her eyes, forcing the memory down. When she opened them, the screen was blurry. "Get out of my head," she whispered to the ghosts. She found the local cell tower's mainframe. It was poorly secured. She was inside its logs in 20 minutes. She woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee. For a moment, she was confused. She was on a soft couch in the penthouse office, a blanket draped over her. She'd fallen asleep at the terminal. The sun was streaming in. It was morning. She stood up, her joints stiff, and followed the smell. It led her to the kitchen, a vast expanse of white marble and stainless steel. Dominic was there, but he wasn't in his suit. He was in gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt that stretched across his shoulders. He was at the island, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee at his elbow. He looked up when she entered. His eyes, clear and gray in the morning light, held no surprise, and he just watched her, his face unreadable. I fell asleep," she said. He nodded. "I saw. There's coffee." She drifted to the pot, her hands shaking slightly. She poured a cup, the heat a comfort. The silence was vast, but not cold. It was still. She was starving. The food in the hotel, the meals Rocco brought, she'd eaten them like an animal. But now, she was just hungry. She opened the refrigerator. It was stocked. Eggs, milk, butter, vegetables. "Do you—" She started, her voice small. "Do you mind if I—" He just shrugged, turning a page. She took it as permission. She found a pan. She found butter. She cracked 6 eggs into a bowl. It was a simple domestic act, an act of a life she hadn't lived in years. The sound of the whisk, the sizzle of the butter in the pan. It was normalcy. It was sanity. She made scrambled eggs and found a loaf of artisan bread. She made toast. She put a plate in front of him. He looked at the plate. He looked at her. I made too much. She lied. He put the paper down. He picked up the fork. He ate. She made a plate for herself and sat at the other end of the massive island, as far as she could get while still being at the same table. They ate in silence. The only sounds, the clink of forks on porcelain and the distant city hum. It was the most intimate and most terrifying meal of her life. When he was finished, he pushed the plate away. He looked at his hand, resting on the white marble. Lila looked, too. His hands were clean, the nails perfect, but the knuckles on his right hand were a mangled map of old, white scar tissue. The impulse was stupid. It was as suicidal as running into the street to stop him. But her hand moved. She reached across the island. Her fingers, thin but clean, and lightly brushed his scarred knuckles. Dominic's entire body went rigid. His eyes snapped to her face, hard and lethal. She didn't pull back. "What happened?" she whispered. His voice was a low growl. "A lesson. From my father. It looks like it still hurts," she said, her voice impossibly soft. His other hand moved, a blur of motion. He didn't grab her. He caught her wrist. His grip was not violent, but it was absolute. A man-trap of flesh and bone. He held her hand there, pressed against his. The air in the room evaporated. He was close, leaning across the island, his face just inches from hers. She could smell the coffee on his breath, the clean, sharp scent of his soap. She could see the dark ring around the gray of his irises. He was a predator. And she was touching him. He wasn't looking at her mouth. He was looking into her eyes, searching, dissecting, trying to figure out what she was, what game she was playing. But Lila wasn't playing a game. She was just still. She wasn't afraid. Not of this. He held the moment, the tension stretching, a wire humming, about to snap. He pulled her, just an inch, closer. The magnetic force of his body was overwhelming. And then he broke it. He dropped her wrist as if it were on fire. He stood up, the chair scraping loudly on the marble floor. "Get dressed," he said, his voice rougher than before. "You found the logs. Now we find the phone." He left the kitchen, leaving her alone, her pulse hammering in her throat, the phantom feeling of his grip still burning on her skin. Rocco found Dominic in the office, staring at the list of phone numbers Lila had pulled from the tower logs. "Boss, we need to talk." "I'm busy, Rocco." "It's about the stray," Rocco said, ignoring the warning. "Boss, you got her cooking you breakfast? She's in your penthouse. She's walking around like she belongs." "She's an asset," Dominic said, his eyes cold. "She's a nobody, a gutter rat. We don't know anything about her, except she was smart enough to stop you. What if that was the plan? What if she was the bait, and now you've brought her inside? The men, they're talking. They see this. They see you, and they think it's risky." "What do they think, Rocco?" Dominic asked, his voice dangerously soft. "They think you're going soft. They think a pretty face has you." Dominic was across the room before Rocco could finish. He didn't hit him. He just got in his space, a solid wall of fury. "She saved my life," Dominic whispered, the words more threatening than a shout. "She found a lead in 2 days that your tech guys couldn't find. Period. She is an asset. I am using the asset. And if I hear one more word about her, from you or any of your men, I will take it as a personal insult. Is that clear?" Rocco, paler than he'd been when Matteo checked the bomb, just nodded. "Yeah, boss. Clear." "Good," Dominic said, stepping back. "Now find out who owns these burner numbers." The tension was a third person in the room with them. For the next 12 hours, they worked side by side. They cross-referenced the burner numbers with the security footage from every camera in a 4-block radius of the restaurant. It was Lila who found him. "Wait," she said, pointing at the screen. "That one. The food delivery guy." Dominic leaned in, his shoulder pressing against hers. The heat from his body was a solid thing. "He's just a delivery guy. Lila—" "No," she insisted. "No, look at his shoes. Tactical boots, not kitchen clogs. He's been standing on that corner for 10 minutes, but his bag is empty. And that's him, the hat. The way he moves. He's scouting." Dominic zoomed in. The man turned his face toward the camera for just a second. It was him. "I'll be damned," Dominic breathed. "He was there an hour before," Lila said, her voice electric with the thrill of the hunt. "He was watching. He knew the camera angles. He knew the valet rotation. He knew your car." Dominic turned. His face inches from hers. He wasn't looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her, and the respect in his eyes was as potent as a kiss. "You're good," he said. "I told you," she whispered, her heart hammering. "I look for the weaknesses." It was 3 a.m. when he finally called it. "Go to bed," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. He walked her down the long, dark hallway to her guest room. The silence was thick with the energy of their work, with the memory of the kitchen, of his hand on her wrist. They stopped at her door. She turned to face him, a small, tired woman in a billionaire's fortress. A strand of dark hair had fallen across her cheek. He lifted his hand, the one with the scars. Lila stopped breathing. He didn't touch her face. He reached out and, with a touch so gentle it was agonizing, he brushed the hair back, tucking it behind her ear. His rough fingertips grazed the shell of her ear, and a shiver went down her entire body. He let his hand linger, his thumb resting for just a second on her jawline. "You're safe here, Lila," he whispered. His eyes locked on hers. He wasn't just talking about the bomber. He was making a promise. "I promise." She could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. He dropped his hand, the air rushing back into the space between them. "Get some sleep." She slipped into her room and leaned against the door, her hand pressed to her chest, her heart trying to escape. Across the street, in the shadows of a closed-down deli, a black van was parked. A man sat in the driver's seat, a long lens camera in his lap. He lowered it, looking at the digital display, a grainy, long-distance shot of the penthouse balcony. Dominic standing there. He clicked again, another shot, through the glass, a woman, small and dark-haired, walking down the hall. The man in the van smiled, a thin, ugly expression. He picked up his phone and dialed. "He's still got her," he said. "Yeah, in the penthouse. It looks like the boss has a weakness after all." The Onyx Club was a jewel box of black lacquer, red velvet and gold light. Now, it was a slaughterhouse. The air, usually thick with the scent of old bourbon and expensive perfume, was choked with the bitter, metallic smell of gunpowder and blood. 3 bodies lay on the plush carpet, covered in sheets by the time Dominic arrived, but the dark, spreading stains underneath were all he needed to see. 2 were his, good men. The third was a rival, a known soldier for the Irish. "A meeting," Dominic said, his voice a flat, dead thing. He was standing in the middle of the room, his perfectly tailored suit a stark contrast to the chaos. Someone set up a meeting. Matteo, his consigliere, looked green. Boss, maybe it was a real sit-down. Maybe it went bad. Went bad? Dominic's gaze snapped to him. It went bad because a 3-man cleanup crew was waiting in the alley. They hit my men. They hit the Irishmen. And they were gone in less than a minute. This wasn't a negotiation. Matteo, this was a message. Rocco was by the bar, his face a mask of granite and fury. It was an ambush. They used the Irishmen as bait to get our men here. It's the Irish, boss. They're making their play. Dominic's eyes were cold. No, the Irish are loud. They like car bombs and shotguns. This was quiet. It was too fast. He knelt by one of the sheets, lifting a corner just enough. His man, his throat had been cut. This was surgical. The Irish brought the noise. Someone else brought the knives. He stood up, his face unreadable. This was an inside job. Someone in my organization set this meet. Someone told the Irish, and someone else told a third party. Someone is playing us all. And he whispered, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. "I'm going to find out who—" He turned and walked out, the broken glass crunching under his shoes. The penthouse was a pressure cooker. For 24 hours, Dominic barely spoke. He prowled the office, a caged tiger, the fury rolling off him in visible waves. His men gave him a wide berth, all except Lila. She was his new, strange shadow. He didn't ask her to be there, he just expected it. when Rocco brought in the personal effects from the dead. He dropped a plastic bag on the desk. "This was in the Irishman's pocket," Rocco said. "Burner phone. Cheap. Our tech guys say it's encrypted. They can't crack it." Dominic looked at the phone. Then he looked at Lila, who was standing by the window. He didn't say a word. He just pushed the bag toward her. Lila picked it up. She looked at the cheap plastic, then at the bank of computers she had claimed as her own. She sat down. This was different from the server logs. This was a personal device, designed to be locked, but the man who'd owned it was dead. He hadn't had time to wipe it. She worked for hours, the rapid, silent tapping of the keys, the only sound in the office. Dominic sat at his desk, not working, just watching her. He watched the intense, focused line of her jaw, the way her eyes darted across the screen. She was in her element. She was a hunter. At 3 a.m, she let out a small, sharp breath. "I'm in." Dominic was at her side in an instant, his heat and his scent, soap and something cold and male enveloping her. "The messages are deleted," she said, her voice tired. "But the data, the fragments are still in the cache. It's not just the Irish." "What did you find?" "It's messy." "There are text fragments to a number in the Irish syndicate. Basic stuff. The package is ready. Confirm the time." But there's another string, heavily encrypted. Emails, not texts, routed through an anonymous server. She pointed. On the screen, a line of garbled code. It's a key. It's a high-level encryption, military grade, but it's familiar. Familiar how? "It's the same base algorithm as the security protocols for the Port Authority," she whispered, her blood running cold. "The Ravenport Port Authority." Dominic's face was stone. "The port. The Irish have been pushing us at the port for 6 months. This phone was talking to them," Lila said, "but it was also talking to someone about them. The messages are... It looks like they're being sold out. This whole meeting. It wasn't an ambush by the Irish. It was a trap for everyone." The implication was suffocating. Someone inside Dominic's organization was not just working with the Irish, but was also working with a third party to eliminate both sides. A power play. Dominic turned and walked to the window, staring out at the dark city. He was losing control of his world, and it was this woman, this ghost, who was showing him the cracks. The stress made him volatile. The next day, he called a meeting. His capos, his top lieutenants, all of them in the penthouse, all of them nervous. Rocco was giving a report on the port. "We've tightened security, boss, double the men, but the last shipment was light, about 10%. 10%, Dominic repeated, his voice dangerously soft. It's the cost of business, boss," Rocco stammered, sweating. "We always have some shrinkage." Dominic exploded. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He was worse. He moved to the center of the room, a vortex of cold rage. "Shrinkage," he hissed. 10% is not shrinkage. 10% is a message. 10% is a rival walking into my house, taking food from my table and spitting in my face. And you, he said, jabbing a finger at Rocco, you stand there and call it shrinkage? Boss, you are a fool, Rocco. You are a blind, comfortable, stupid fool. You are so busy counting the money I put in your pocket that you didn't even see them take it. Rocco's face was white. Matteo stepped forward, his hands up in a placating gesture. Dominic, the man is loyal. He just what? Matteo? Dominic snapped, turning his fury on the older man. He just missed it? You missed it? How many of you are missing it? How many of you are sitting here, getting fat and lazy, while my organization burns? Get out. Dominic, get out, all of you. The men scrambled, a room full of killers, all of them terrified. They flooded out of the office, leaving a silence that vibrated with anger. Dominic stood in the middle of the room, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. Lila hadn't moved. She was in her glass-walled office, but she had seen it all. She had seen the raw, terrifying power he held, and she had seen the deep, primal fear in his eyes, the fear of betrayal. He looked up and saw her. Their eyes met through the glass. He didn't move for a long moment. Then he walked into her small office, the space suddenly tiny, charged and suffocating. She didn't look away. She didn't cower. She just met his gaze. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said, his voice a low, rough rasp. "You're scared," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement. His jaw tightened. "I'm not—" "You are," she interrupted, her voice soft. "You're angry because you're scared. You're losing control, and you don't know who to trust." He stared at her, the anger in his eyes warring with a raw, ugly vulnerability. He had just humiliated his most trusted men. He had shown them weakness by showing them his rage. "I was out of line," he said. It was not an apology. It was a confession, and it was a confession he had made only to her. He turned and left her. The silence of the penthouse, his only companion. That night, she found him in the kitchen. The lights were off, save for the blue-white glow of the city skyline pouring through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He was sitting at the marble island, a bottle of something dark and a single glass in front of him. He was in a black t-shirt, his bare arms corded with muscle, resting on the cold stone. Lila hesitated. "I'm not going to yell," he said, his voice a low rumble in the dark. He didn't turn. She walked in, her bare feet silent on the floor. She slid onto the stool opposite him, the same spot she'd been in that first morning. He pushed the bottle toward her, then got up, retrieved a second glass from a cabinet, and set it in front of her. He poured her a drink. 2 fingers. She drank. The liquid was fire, burning a path down her throat. "I've never seen men that scared," she said, her voice a whisper. "Fear is a tool," he replied, staring into his glass. "It's all I have right now. It's the only thing I know is real." "It's not," she said. He looked up, his eyes dark pits in the dim light. "It's the loneliest thing," she said, her voice so quiet he had to lean in to hear her. "Being scared, being alone." She looked down at her hands, at the glass. "When I was on the street, I wasn't scared of the cold or the hunger. I was scared of the silence, the invisibility. You can be surrounded by a million people, and you are completely, totally alone. They don't see you. You're not real." She took another sip, the fire giving her courage. "But it was like that before the street. I was in my office. I was a wizard. They called me. I was the best. And then I found a weakness, and they made me disappear." She finally looked at him. A single, hot tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't bother to wipe it away. "For 3 years. I've been a ghost for 3 years. I know what it's like to be alone. Dominic, I know what it's like to be so alone you're not even sure you exist." He was watching her, his face carved from shadow. He was so still. He might not have been breathing. He reached out his hand, the one with the scars. He didn't touch her arm. He didn't touch her hand. He cupped her face, his thumb, rough and calloused, moved to the tear track on her cheek, wiping away the moisture. His hand was a brand, a cage of heat and strength. She leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. The contact was an earthquake. "Lila?" he whispered, his voice an agony. Her eyes opened. He was closer, his face just inches from hers. The world had shrunk to the space between them. The air was too thick to breathe. "You saved me," he whispered, the words a raw confession. "From a bomb, from this." He was not a man who asked. He was a man who took, but he didn't take. He waited. He held her face, his thumb stroking her jaw, and he waited. Lila closed the last inch. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision. It was the desperate, starving kiss of 2 people who had been alone for a lifetime. His mouth was hard, demanding, but his hand was gentle on her face, holding her as if she were made of spun glass. She didn't just kiss him back. She clung to him. Her hands came up, grabbing his t-shirt, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to him. It was a kiss of fear and rage and loneliness and a desperate, aching need. He broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers. They were both breathing hard, their breath mingling in the dark. "This is—" she started. "I know," he rasped. He stood up, pulling her with him. He didn't let go of her hand. He led her from the kitchen, down the long, dark hall, past her guest room, and into his. His room was dark, minimalist and cold, but he was not. He turned her to face him, his hands moving from her face to her shoulders, then sliding down her arms. He didn't rip her clothes off. He was careful, tender. He lifted the hem of her t-shirt, his scarred knuckles grazing her stomach. She shivered. He pulled it over her head, his eyes never leaving hers, watching her, reading her. He was looking for fear. She wasn't afraid, not of this, not of him. He unfastened her pants and they pooled at her feet. She stood before him, small and vulnerable, but not weak. He touched the bruise on her arm, the one Rocco had given her, now a faded yellow. His jaw clenched. He lifted her, his strength effortless, and carried her to the bed. He laid her on the cool, high-thread count sheets, and for a moment, he just looked at her. "You're sure?" he said. It was not a question. It was a final courtesy. She answered by lifting her hand and placing it on his chest, over his heart. It was hammering. He shed his own clothes in the darkness, a shadow detaching itself from the world. He came to her, his body a solid, warm weight. The night was not about passion. It was about possession. It was about solace. His mouth was on her, his hands learning her, and her hands were on him, learning his scars. It was an act of quiet desperation. Two people drowning, clinging to the only solid thing in the ocean. It was an anchor in the storm. It was a promise, made in silence, skin to skin. That for this one night, neither of them was alone. When Lila woke, the sun was streaming into the room. The light was harsh, and it took her a moment to realize where she was. She was in his bed. The sheets, which had been a haven, now felt like a trap. The scent of him was everywhere, on the pillows, on her skin, but the bed was empty. He was gone. She sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. The room was silent. He hadn't just gone to the bathroom. He was gone, left. The coldness that had left her last night came flooding back, sharper and more painful than before. She was a fool, a stupid, lonely fool. She was an asset, a stray, a distraction. She got out of bed, his bed, and fled. She showered in her own room, the hot water not nearly hot enough to scrub the shame and the feel of his skin from hers. She dressed, putting on the armor of clean sweatpants and a t-shirt. She couldn't stay in the room. She couldn't pace. She needed to work. Work was safe. Work was real. She went to the terminal in the glass-walled office. She was a woman on fire, her mind sharp with a new, cold fury. She wasn't just looking for the bomber. She was looking for the traitor, the one who had started all this. She went back to the logs from the night of the club's shooting, back to the Port Authority encryption. She had a feeling, a nagging, sick feeling. She cross-referenced the port's algorithm with Dominic's internal server logs. Who had access to both? The list was small. Dominic, Rocco, Matteo. She dug into the server logs, into the admin commands, and she found it. A hidden partition, a ghost drive, cloaked to look like a system backup. It was small, only a few gigs, but it was locked, encrypted. Lila's heart hammered. She knew this. This was her. This was the weakness. She worked, her fingers flying, her mind a cold, logical machine. She wasn't a woman who had just been left in a mobster's bed. She was a wizard. She was a hunter. It took her 2 hours. The encryption was good. It was almost perfect. But she found the hole. She broke it. The partition opened. It was a single folder, and in the folder, a single encrypted file. A ledger. She opened it. Her world stopped. It wasn't just the port. It was everything. Shipments, payroll, safe houses, names, dates, amounts, and transfers. Massive, complex transfers of funds to an offshore account. The same account she'd seen in the burner phone. The account that was funding the third party, the one setting the Irish against Dominic, and at the bottom, a digital signature, a routing log. The file had been created and was updated daily from a single, dedicated terminal. A terminal she recognized, a terminal in the West Wing, Matteo's terminal. Matteo, The calm one, the voice of reason, the man who had looked green at the club, the snake. Lila's blood turned to ice. She grabbed the tablet, loaded the file, and ran. She didn't knock. She burst through the main office doors, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Dominic, She stopped. He was there, sitting at his desk, his face a mask of cold control, and sitting in the chair opposite him, a cup of coffee in his hand, was Mateo. He looked up at her, and his face broke into a warm, paternal smile. "Ah, Lila," he said, his voice like smooth, warm honey. "Good morning, we were just talking about you." Lila's blood turned to ice. Her brain, which had been racing, slammed to a dead stop. The file. The ledger, Mateo. Mateo, who was smiling at her, his eyes warm and crinkling at the corners. He looked like a favorite uncle. "Lila," he said again, "we were just discussing the port security. Dominic was saying you've been a great help." Dominic. Her eyes snapped to him. He hadn't moved. His face was granite, his eyes as cold and empty as the winter sky. He looked at her as if she were a stranger, a mild irritant, the man who had held her, who had kissed her, who had slept in her body and her mind, was gone. In his place was the boss. The tablet in her hand suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She couldn't breathe. She was a fool. This was a test, or worse, it was a setup. He was gone when she woke up, and now he was sitting with the snake. Had he known? Was she just a pawn? Her street rat instinct screamed, "Play dumb, be invisible, be the stray they think you are." She forced a stammer, her eyes wide with a fear that was only 90% acting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." The door was open. She clutched the tablet to her chest. "What's that, child?" Mateo asked, his voice all smooth concern. "It's nothing. I was working," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. She looked at Dominic, a desperate, silent plea. "Please, see me. I think I broke something," she said, the lie coming to her in a rush. "In the backup server, the West Wing terminal." It was a gunshot, a direct, undeniable signal. The West Wing, Mateo's office. Dominic's face did not flicker, not a muscle, but his eyes, for a fraction of a second, tightened. Mateo's smile wavered. "The West Wing. That's my terminal. Dear, I'm sure it's fine." "Lila," Dominic said, his voice flat, cutting through the tension. "We are in a meeting. Whatever you broke can wait. Put the tablet on the console and go to your room." It was a dismissal. Cold, sharp, and public. It was a slap, and it was the loudest, clearest message he could have sent. "I understand. Be quiet. Obey." "Yes," she whispered, her face burning with humiliation. I'm sorry." She walked on shaking legs to the console by the door, placed her tablet, the one holding the proof of his world's betrayal, on the black marble, and walked out. She didn't run. She made it to her room, and the second the door clicked shut, she was sick in the marble bathroom, her body convulsing from the terror, the betrayal, and the whiplash of the last 12 hours. An hour passed, or maybe a day. She was lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, when her door opened. It was Dominic. He didn't speak. He just jerked his head. "My office. Now." He turned and walked away. The tablet was on his desk, the ledger open. He was not looking at it. He was standing at the window, staring out at the city. "He's been with my family for 40 years, Dominic said to the glass. "He taught me how to tie a tie. He held my mother's hand at my father's funeral." Lila stood in the center of the room, small and silent. She said nothing. "He's going to burn my world to the ground," he said. He turned, and his face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. "He's not just stealing. He's not just working with the Irish, that offshore account. He's been funding a third party, the ones at the club. He's paying them with my money to kill my men. He's setting them against each other," Lila whispered, "so he can take what's left. He's not smart enough to do this alone." Dominic growled. "This third party. He's a puppet. We need to find out who's pulling the strings. So, what do you do?" "What I do," Dominic said, "is I put a bullet in his head." "You can't," Lila said, and the strength in her own voice surprised her. His eyes snapped to hers. "Excuse me? You can't," she repeated, stepping forward. "You kill him, and his friends will know you're onto them. They'll disappear, or they'll accelerate their plan. They'll burn you to the ground. You said it yourself. He's a puppet. You kill the puppet. The puppeteer just drops the strings and walks away. You need to catch the puppeteer." He stared at her, the surprise in his eyes real. He had expected a victim, and he'd gotten a strategist. "What do you propose, Lila, a sting operation?" he mocked. "Yes," she said, refusing to back down. "That's exactly what I propose. We need him to make a move, a big one. We need him to get sloppy. We need him to overreach. You said he's greedy. Use it." Dominic was silent, but he was listening. "We feed him bait," she said, her mind racing. The old, familiar hunt returning. Something he can't resist. Something that forces him to contact his new partners. And when he does, I'll be waiting. A ghost of a smile, cold and dangerous, touched Dominic's lips. "Bait. You have to plant a keylogger on his terminal," Lila said. "A physical one. I can't do it remotely. He'll detect the software. I need to get in his office." "No." The word was absolute. "You are not leaving this penthouse. You are not going anywhere near him. Dominic, it's the only way. I can do it. I'm invisible, remember? I'm the stray. I'll get lost and accidentally wander in there. He'll just think I'm stupid. I said no. I will not. I will not risk you. Rocco will do it." "Rocco?" Lila laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Rocco can barely use his email. He'll be seen in a second. Matteo will know something is wrong. It has to be me. I'm the only one who's not a threat." "You are not going—" "Why?" she shouted. The frustration of the morning, of his rejection, of this entire insane situation, boiling over. "Why? Because I'm your asset? Because I'm the girl you slept with and then left in a cold bed without a word. You don't get to lock me up and pretend it's for my own good." The air cracked. He was across the room in 2 strides. He didn't just pin her. He slammed his hand against the wall by her head, the sound like a gunshot. He was a vortex of rage, his body a solid wall trapping her. His face was inches from hers, his eyes burning. "You think I left you?" he hissed, his voice a low, brutal rasp. "You think that was a game? I woke up at 5. I saw the file you were working on. I saw the Port Authority encryption, and I knew you were close. I've been pulling my entire world apart for the last 3 hours, trying to find the man who put a gun to my head, and you think I was ignoring you?" He was shaking. Or she was. She couldn't tell. "I didn't want you in this room when I brought Matteo here. I wanted you safe. I wanted you clear of it." He leaned in, his forehead almost touching hers, his voice dropping to a tormented whisper. "You are not a tool. You are not a stray. And you are not disposable to me." The admission hung in the air, raw and bleeding. It was the most honest, terrifying thing anyone had ever said to her. Her fear didn't just evaporate. It was burned away by the heat of his confession. She was shaking, her body alive with a new, different kind of adrenaline. She raised a trembling hand. He thought she would push him away. She didn't. She fisted her hand in the front of his shirt, pulled his mouth down to hers, and kissed him. It was not the desperate, lonely kiss from the kitchen. This was a claim. It was an answer. It was a raw, primal, and angry kiss. She kissed him with all the fear and fury and confusion she felt. She kissed him like he was the only solid thing in a world that was on fire. He didn't just kiss her back. He consumed her. His other hand came up, grabbing the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. He broke the pin, his arm wrapping around her waist, lifting her off her feet, slamming her back against the wall. His mouth was on hers, on her jaw, on her throat. "Dominic!" she gasped, her hands tearing at his shirt. He carried her. He didn't lead her. He carried her to his room, kicking the door shut behind them. He didn't lay her on the bed. He set her on her feet, and he just looked at her. The fury was gone, replaced by a raw, aching need that she recognized, because she felt it too, This was not about solace. This was about affirmation. He didn't tear her clothes. He undressed her, his hands shaking, his eyes locked on hers. He was learning her body in the light, and she let him. She undid the buttons on his shirt, her fingers brushing the hard muscle of his chest. This time was not a whisper in the dark. It was a raw, emotional, almost violent claiming. It was a desperate, wordless promise in the middle of a war. It was the sound of two broken things fitting together. Not perfectly, but so tightly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The next day, the air in the penthouse was thick with a new, dangerous energy. The plan was set. Lila, who had won her argument, was a bundle of nervous, electric energy. She was walking from the kitchen, a cup of coffee in her hand, when a voice stopped her. Enjoying the view? She turned. Rocco. He was standing in the hall, his arms crossed, his face a mask of undisguised contempt. "I don't know what you mean," she said, her hand tightening on the mug. "Oh, I think you do," he sneered, stepping closer, crowding her. "You think you're smart. You think you're the queen. Came from a gutter, and now you're sleeping in the boss's bed, cooking his breakfast. You think you've got him wrapped around your little finger." "I'm just helping," she said, her voice small. "You're not helping," he hissed, his voice dropping. "You're a distraction. He's soft. He's making mistakes, and it all started when you showed up. I saved his life. You got lucky," Rocco spat, "but luck runs out." "I did some checking. Atherton Gray. Unstable. Prone to delusions. An extortionist. That's you, isn't it? You're a little girl lost." Lila's blood ran cold. "I see what you're doing," Rocco said, his face inches from hers. "But I'm not fooled. I'm not like him. One word from me. One reminder of what you really are. And you're back on the street where you belong, or in a grave. Stay out of his head, or I will put you out of it." "Rocco." The voice was ice. They both froze. Dominic was at the end of the hall, standing in the doorway of his office. He hadn't raised his voice. He didn't need to. Rocco's face went white. "My office," Dominic said. "Now." Rocco didn't look at Lila. He just deflated. He walked past Dominic into the office like a man walking to the gallows. Dominic followed, his eyes meeting Lila's for a brief, unreadable second, and shut the door. Lila stood in the hall, her coffee forgotten, her body shaking so hard she could barely stand. She didn't hear the meeting. There was no shouting. There was just silence. An hour later, Rocco emerged. He was gray. He looked 10 years older. He walked down the hall, and he didn't just not look at her. He actively looked away, his eyes fixed on the floor. He was a dog that had been beaten. He had been silenced. Lila should have felt safe. She should have felt protected. She had never felt more terrified in her life. Dominic hadn't just protected her. He had chosen her. Openly. Against his second in command. He had drawn a line in the sand. He had shown his entire organization his weakness. Rocco hadn't been a threat. He had been a warning. The men would see this. They would see her as the reason their boss was soft. She was no longer a ghost. She was a target. She was the liability. And she was going to get him killed. She couldn't stay. She waited until night. Until the penthouse was quiet. She waited until she knew Dominic was in his office, on a call with his other capos, finalizing the bait for Matteo. She didn't pack. She had nothing. She didn't take the main elevator. She took the service stairs, the ones she'd seen the staff use, her heart hammered with every step. She was a ghost again. This was for the best. She would disappear. He would be angry, but he would be safe. The target would be gone. She made it down 22 floors. Her legs ached. She pushed open the door to the subterranean garage. It was vast, quiet, and smelled of concrete and gasoline. She was 10 steps toward the street ramp when a black van, its headlights off, slid silently in front of her. The side door flew open. Before she could even scream, 2 men were on her. These were not men like Rocco. These were not gangsters. They were quiet, professional. They wore black. She fought, she kicked, she bit, she scratched. She was the gutter rat Rocco had accused her of being. A hand clamped over her mouth, a sharp, stinging pain in her neck. The world went gray, blurry, and then black. The squeal of tires was deafening in the concrete garage. Dominic's SUV, a 2-ton monster, slammed into the side of the black van, crushing the metal door. The impact threw the men inside the van, but the one holding Lila still had her. Dominic was out of the driver's seat before the SUV had even stopped moving. He wasn't a man. He was a force of nature, a black-clad angel of death. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. The first man out of the van had a gun. Dominic's shot was a dull thud from a suppressed weapon. The man dropped. The second man tried to use Lila as a shield. Dominic didn't hesitate. He fired twice. 2 precise shots, and the man's head snapped back. He crumpled, leaving Lila to fall to the pavement. A third man, the driver, tried to accelerate. Dominic put 3 rounds through the windshield. The van lurched and died. Silence. The entire thing had taken less than 5 seconds. Dominic was moving, his gun still up, scanning. He kicked the van door, the metal groaning. She was there. A small, terrified heap on the concrete floor, her eyes wide with terror, a small trickle of blood running from a cut on her temple. He dropped the gun. "Lila!" He scooped her up, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her out of the van and into his chest. She was shaking so hard she couldn't breathe. "It's all right," he was whispering, his voice a rough, broken thing. "It's all right. I've got you. I've got you." A black sedan slid up. His driver, Dominic, didn't let her go. He opened the back door, got in, and pulled her onto his lap, cradling her. "Home," he barked. The car peeled out of the garage, leaving the carnage behind. He held her, his multi-$1,000 suit ruined, her blood smearing on his white shirt. He just held her, his hand stroking her hair, his body a solid, warm wall between her and the world. She was drifting, the drug they'd used pulling her under. She buried her face in his chest, inhaling his scent, clinging to him. She was so tired of running. As she fell into the darkness, she murmured, her words slurred, her voice a child's whisper. Why are you doing this for me?" He tightened his grip, his face buried in her hair, his own eyes shut tight. He whispered the answer, not to her, but to himself, a confession in the dark. "Because I don't want to lose you." The world returned to her as a dull, throbbing ache. The first thing she registered was the silence, not the sterile silence of the penthouse, but a thick, heavy quiet, like snow. The second was the smell, not glass and steel, but old wood, beeswax, and the faint, clean scent of pine. Lila's eyes opened. She was not in his bed. She was in a bed, a massive 4-poster, under a comforter so heavy it felt like a shield. The room was not a modern box. It was a cabin, a fortress of dark, polished logs and river stone. A fire crackled in a massive hearth, casting a warm, flickering glow on the walls. "You're awake!" His voice came from the shadows. She turned her head, her neck stiff. Dominic was sitting in a heavy leather armchair near the fire, a book open on his lap, though she doubted he'd been reading. He wasn't in a suit. He was in a dark, heavy-knit sweater and jeans. He was unshaven, a rough, dark stubble shadowing his jaw. He looked not like a boss. He looked like a man. "Where?" Her voice was a dry rasp. "My father's house," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Up north. Only 3 people in the world know this place exists. Now, 4, he corrected himself. Rocco, me, you, and a dead man." He stood and came to the bed. He had a glass of water in his hand. He didn't hand it to her. He sat on the edge of the mattress, slid his arm under her back, and lifted her, holding the glass to her lips. She drank. The water was cold, and it was the best thing she had ever tasted. "How long?" she whispered, her head resting against the solid wall of his shoulder. 2 days, he said. "The doctor came. He gave you a sedative, said the cut on your temple was clean. Just rest. You fought the men in the van. You fought the drug. You fought me. I tried to leave," she confessed, the shame a cold weight. "I know," he said, his voice flat. He laid her back against the pillows. "Don't do it again." He never left her side. For 2 days, he was a sentinel. He brought her soup. He read while she slept. He sat by the fire, taking calls, his voice a low, angry murmur, while she drifted in and out of a medicated haze. The intimacy was not of the flesh, it was deeper. It was the profound, wordless bond of a shared near death. He had pulled her from the grave, and now he was refusing to let her go. On the third day, the fog cleared. She woke, and he was at the window, on the phone, his back to her. His voice was sharp, a razor's edge. He did what? He froze the port account? On whose authority? A pause. He called a meeting? Without me? Dominic's hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist. Let him. Let the rat get comfortable in the trap. Just watch the money. He hung up, his body radiating a black, cold fury. He thinks you're dead, Lila said, her voice clear. He turned. The relief in his eyes was a physical thing, but he masked it instantly. You're back. Or you're running, she continued, sitting up, the heavy comforter pooling in her lap. Matteo, he thinks he won. He thinks I'm gone. He thinks he's the new boss. He is, Dominic said, his voice bitter. For now. He'll be sloppy, she said. The old, familiar energy was returning. The hunter, he's arrogant, he's celebrating. And he's left a digital trail a mile wide. Dominic walked to the fire, poking at the logs, his anger a restless, violent thing. It doesn't matter. You're done, Lila. I'm taking you out of the country. Tonight, you're out. Out? She threw off the blanket, her bare feet hitting the cold wooden floor. Out? He sent men to kidnap me. He drugged me. He put a target on my back. He tried to erase me. Just like Atherton Gray. Just like all of them. She walked to him, a small, pale woman in a borrowed silk pajama set, but her eyes were on fire. This isn't your fight anymore. Dominic, it's mine. I am not a loose end. I am not a stray, and I am not a victim. He wants to play? We're going to play. He stared at her, a new respect dawning in his eyes. I need a terminal, she said, the best one you have, and I need a direct line into the offshore bank he's using. He led her to a study, a room paneled in dark, rich mahogany. He sat her at a desk that smelled of oil and old leather, and he brought her a laptop. This is a clean line, he said. No one can trace it. He won't just have money in that account, she said, her fingers already flying. He's not just a thief. He's a middleman. He's a broker. He's been keeping ledgers on you, on the Irish, on his new partners. He's keeping insurance. I'm going to find it, and I'm going to take it all. For the next 10 hours, she worked. Dominic sat with her, a silent guardian, bringing her coffee, watching her work. He saw her not as a hacker, but as a warrior. She was dissecting his enemy with a surgical, cold precision. At 2 a.m, she went still. Oh, no. What? He was at her side in an instant. It's not just embezzlement, she whispered, her face pale. Dominic, he's a monster. I found a folder. Contingencies. It's murder. She turned the screen. A grainy, black and white photo of a man she didn't know, a newspaper clipping. Port Authority union boss found dead. Accident suspected. Marone, Dominic breathed, his voice a sick whisper. That was 3 years ago. We thought it was the Irish. It was Matteo, Lila said. He was cleaning house for his new partners. He's been playing this game for years. He's been funding them, feeding them us. She clicked again. The screen filled with names, dates, photographs, evidence. He has insurance on everyone, she said. He's not a puppet. He's the one holding all the strings. Dominic stared at the screen, at the proof of a betrayal that cut deeper than bone. The man who had held his mother's hand at his father's funeral. His face was a void, a terrible, calm emptiness. He stood up, walked to a gun cabinet in the corner, and entered a code. The door opened. What are you doing? Lila asked, her blood running cold. He took out a black, tactical-looking pistol. He began checking the magazine. The click, click, click of him pressing in rounds, a horrifying, metallic sound in the quiet room. I'm ending this the old way. What? What old way? I'm going to burn his world to the ground, Dominic said, his voice flat, dead. I'm taking my men. We're going to his house. We're going to find him, and I am going to take him apart, piece by piece. No, she ran to him, grabbing his arm, the one holding the gun. Dominic, no. Look at me. He wouldn't. He was staring at the gun, at the death in his hand. This is what he wants, she cried. He wants you to be the animal, the monster, the old way. This is what your father taught you, isn't it? This is the lesson on your knuckles. His head snapped up, his eyes a cold, burning silver. Don't let him win, she pleaded, her voice breaking, tears streaming down her face. Don't let him turn you into this isn't you. This is exactly who I am, he growled, his voice a low, tormented thing. You don't know me. You don't know what I've done. I am a killer. I am the monster. No, she said, her hands moving from his arm to his face, forcing him to look at her. The man who sat by my bed for 2 days. The man who fed me, who held me. That is not a monster. That is the man I am talking to. Please. He was shaking, torn between the violence that was his birthright and the new, terrifying pull of her voice. He tried to kill you, he whispered, his voice breaking. He tried to take you from me. And he will pay, she said, her voice fierce. But not this way, not in the dark. We will destroy him. Dominic, we won't just kill him. We will end him. My way. With this, she pointed back to the laptop. With the truth, he looked at her, at the tears on her face, at the fire in her eyes. He looked down at the gun in his hand. He looked at his scarred knuckles. Slowly, deliberately, he ejected the magazine. The bullets spilled onto the desk. He put the empty gun down. The Children's Hospital Gala, he said, his voice a rough rasp. It's tonight. Lila blinked, confused. What? The gala for the city. All the politicians, the bankers, the respectable people. He's being honored. Man of the Year. He thinks I'm dead, or I'm on the run. He's giving a speech. He's taking his bow. A cold, slow smile spread across Lila's face. Then that's where we do it. We'll let him have his stage, and then we'll burn it down. We'll unmask him in front of the whole world. Dominic looked at her, and the love and awe in his eyes were a new kind of weapon. He reached out, his hand tracing the line of her jaw. This is the last time, he said, his voice a vow. We end Mateo. We end his partners. We end all of it. And after tonight, I'm done. He pulled her into him, his arms a steel cage, his face buried in her hair. It was a promise. It was a plea. The penthouse, when they returned, was a war room. Rocco was there, his face grim. When he saw Lila, he didn't sneer. He nodded. Once. A sign of new, hard-won respect. The room is set, Rocco said. My men are the catering staff, the valets, and the security. We're clean. Good, Dominic said. Get her a dress. An hour later, a woman with a kind face and a measuring tape had come and gone. Dresses arrived, dozens, boxes from every high-end boutique in Ravenport. Lila looked at the sea of silk and satin. She, who had lived in a coat, who had worn the same jeans for 6 months, she chose one, a dark emerald green velvet. It was simple, severe, and perfect. When she emerged from the bedroom, the penthouse fell silent. Her hair was swept up. Her skin, finally healed, was pale and luminous. The dress clung to her, a queen's armor. Dominic was in a tuxedo. He was standing by the window. He turned, and he stopped breathing. He had seen her as a ghost. He had seen her as a wizard. He had seen her as a victim. Now, for the first time, he saw her as the woman who was his equal. He walked to her, his eyes never leaving hers, and held out his hand. They won't know what hit them. The ballroom at the Regent was a sea of crystal, diamonds, and power. Ravenport's elite, the 1%, were all there, laughing, drinking, and unaware. Mateo was at the head table, the guest of honor, beaming. He was accepting congratulations, his face a mask of civic pride and humble gratitude. Then he saw him, Dominic and Lila, walking through the main doors. The champagne glass in Mateo's hand shattered. A wave of silence followed them. This was not a man who was dead. This was not a man who was running. This was a king. in his palace, and he had just brought his new queen. They didn't go to the head table. They took a small, reserved table in the back, a table in the shadows, and they sat. The mayor was on stage, his voice booming. And now, a man who represents the new beating heart of our city, a man of vision, of charity, our man of the year, Matteo Gallo. Matteo, his composure regained, his face a mask of arrogance, walked to the podium. He saw Dominic. He saw the challenge. He saw his moment. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth as honey. I am humbled. I accept this award for the future of Ravenport, a future of transparency, a future free of the old, violent ways. He looked directly at Dominic. It is time for the shadows to step aside. It is time for a new, civilized leadership. He was declaring himself. He was making his play. Lila was at the table, a small, black laptop open, her fingers a blur. She looked at Dominic. "He's all yours." Dominic looked at her, his eyes full of a dark, cold fire. Now, Lila hit the enter key. The two massive screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing Matteo's smiling face, flickered. They went black, and then the ledger, bank statements, offshore accounts, the words Irish syndicate, the words Port Authority embezzlement. The room was silent. Then the photos, Morone, the dead union boss, the emails, the murder. He's a killer, a woman screamed. Matteo was at the podium, his face the color of ash. He was tapping the microphone. It's a lie. It's a technical problem. Dominic stood up. "Is it Matteo?" His voice, unamplified, cut through the room. "Is it all a lie?" Matteo's civilized mask dissolved. He was a cornered rat. He reached inside his tuxedo and pulled a small, silver pistol. Chaos. People were screaming, diving under tables. But Matteo's guards, two men in suits near the stage, were already drawing their own weapons. They never got a shot off. Rocco, dressed as a waiter, took out the first one. Two more of Dominic's men, the security at the door, took out the second. It was a clean, brutal, and silent operation. Matteo, wild-eyed, saw it was over. He saw Dominic, unguarded, walking toward Lila. He raised his gun. Not at Dominic, at her. "No!" Dominic bellowed. It was in slow motion. The flash, the bang, Lila. Her street instinct screaming was already moving, diving, not away, but under the heavy, linen-covered table. Dominic was there in a second, not diving, but standing. His body a shield, his tuxedo-clad form a bulwark between her and the bullet. He grunted, a sharp, pained sound, as a second shot went wide. She heard a thud. Rocco, his face a mask of fury, had tackled Matteo, and the fight was over. The room was silent. Save for the sobbing, Leah was under the table, her heart hammering. "Dominic!" He was leaning against the table, his hand pressed hard against his left shoulder. "Dominic!" she scrambled out. "You're hit. God, you're bleeding." His white shirt was blooming with a dark, wet red. He looked at his hand. He looked at her. Her emerald dress crumpled, her face pale with terror, and he smiled, a real, pained, exhausted smile. "It's just a graze," he rasped. You're wearing green." Rocco was there, his face grim. "Boss, it's done. Matteo is handled." Dominic just nodded, his eyes never leaving Lila's. He held out his good hand, the one with the scars. "Come on, let's go home." She took his hand, he pulled her up, and, shielding his wound, his other arm wrapped around her. They walked out of the ballroom, out of the chaos, leaving the blood, the lies, and the old world burning behind them. Matteo was dead. The Empire was in flames, and Dominic was dying. The bullet had not been a graze. It had torn through the dense muscle of his shoulder, missed his clavicle, and ripped a ragged 4-inch exit wound in his back. He had lost a catastrophic amount of blood in the car. They weren't at the penthouse. They were at the safe house, the log cabin fortress in the north, the only place he was truly clean. Rocco had gotten them there, his face a mask of gray terror, and had brought a doctor, a quiet, older man with unsteady hands who specialized in not asking questions. "He's strong," the doctor had said, his voice a reedy whisper after 6 hours of surgery on the kitchen table. But the next 48 hours, It's the infection. Keep the dressings clean, keep him warm, and pray." The doctor left. Rocco left, to go and hold the fragments of the city together. And Lila stayed. For 2 days, she did not sleep. She was no longer a hacker. She was no longer a victim. She was a sentinel. She was a nurse. She was a lifeline. She was the one who boiled the water. She was the one who, every 3 hours, bit her lip until it bled while she gently, meticulously cleaned the raw, sutured edges of the wound. She learned the landscape of his body, not through passion, but through survival. She saw the old, white scars, the map of his violent life. She saw this new, angry red one, the one that had been meant for her. He was a furnace, a storm of fever. He thrashed, his good arm flailing, his voice a low, pained groan, trapped in a world of ghosts. She held him down. She spoke to him, her voice a low, constant murmur. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Just rest, Dominic. Rest." She would cool his face with a damp cloth, her touch infinitely gentle. She, who had forgotten the feel of softness, now dispensed it like a balm. On the 3rd day, the fever broke. She was dozing in the chair, her head on her arms, when his voice, a dry, cracked rasp, cut the silence. "Water!" Her head snapped up. His eyes were open, they were clear, and they were focused on her. She scrambled to the pitcher, her hands shaking, and brought the glass to his lips. He drank, his eyes never leaving her face. You're still here," he whispered. "I'm still here," she said, her voice thick. He looked at his bandaged shoulder, at the sling. He looked at her, at the dark, exhausted circles under her eyes, at her rumpled clothes. "Matteo? He's gone," she said. "It's over." He sank back into the pillows, the tension leaving his body. He was weak. He was vulnerable. He was, for the first time in his life, completely at the mercy of another human being. She sat on the edge of the bed and picked up the bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. "This will hurt. Just do it," he rasped. She began to clean the wound. Her touch was sure now. It was professional. He hissed as the cloth touched a raw nerve, but he did not move. He just watched her. He watched the absolute, unwavering focus in her eyes. He watched the determination in the set of her small jaw. In that moment, Lila had her realization. It came on not as a crash, but as a quiet sunrise. She thought of the alcove, the cold, the invisibility, the gnawing, endless hunger. She thought of the fear she had felt, the constant, grinding terror of the street. She had thought, for weeks, that she was just running away from that. She was wrong. She looked at the man in the bed, this broken, violent, and complicated man who had looked at her, a ghost, and seen a person. The man who had taken a bullet for her. She wasn't running from the cold. She was running to the warmth. The idea of leaving him, of taking a new life, of being anywhere else but here, in this room, caring for this man. It was an amputation. It was unthinkable. The streets weren't her past. They were just a road that had, impossibly, led her home. She didn't want the streets. She didn't want a new life. She wanted him. A week later, he was sitting up in the armchair by the fire. He was pale, thin, but the iron was back in his spine. Lila sat opposite him, on the hearth, nursing a mug of coffee. The silence was comfortable, domestic. "It's done," he said, his voice quiet. "Rocco called. The organization is stable. The third party, Matteo's partners. They've vanished. They're ghosts. For now," Lila said. "For good," he countered. "Without Matteo, their man on the inside. They're blind. They're gone." He looked at her, his face serious, his gray eyes clear and deep. "The gala, it's a mess. The world thinks I'm a monster." "You're a monster who exposed a killer in a corrupt political machine," Lila said. "The papers, the real ones, are calling you an anti-hero, a vigilante." He snorted, a humorless sound. "That's one word for it." He leaned forward, his good hand resting on his knee. "Lila, you're not safe in this city. Not with me, the name Varelli. It's poison now. And you're the woman who stood with me." Her heart went cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name, "that I owe you more than my life. I'm giving you a way out. A real one. I have an account, a private one. It has enough. 10 million, 20, whatever you want. I can have Rocco arrange a new name, a passport, a house, Paris, London, Sydney, anywhere. Anywhere you want to go. You can be Sarah, Jane. You can be a tech consultant. You can be normal." He was offering her the world. He was offering her the life she had lost, and all she felt was a cold, desolate hollow. He was firing her. He was saving her, the only way he knew how, by sending her away. "You're paying me?" she whispered, her voice dead. His face tightened. I'm making you safe." "No," she said. She stood up, the mug in her hands. "You're getting rid of your loose end, the liability." "Don't," he growled. "Don't do that. What do you want me to do, Dominic? Say thank you. Take the money and what? Forget? Forget the alley? Forget the penthouse? Forget that you took a bullet?" "Yes," he said, standing up, his voice rising. "That's exactly what I want. I want you to go. I want you to be safe. I want you to have a life that doesn't involve this. Blood, guns. I want you to have the life you deserved before they took it from you." She set the mug down on the mantelpiece, her hand perfectly steady. She turned and faced him. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," she said, her voice quiet, but steel. "I don't want your money. I don't want a new name. I don't want Paris." He stared at her, his face a mask of confusion. "Then, what? What do you want?" "It's stupid," she whispered. "Lila, tell me." She looked him in the eye, and for the first time, she didn't just let him see her. She showed him. "I want to stay," she said. He froze. "Stay? Here? In this cabin? Here, in the penthouse, in the car. I don't care about the where. I care about the who. I want to stay. With you." He looked at her as if she had just spoken a language he'd never heard. "With me." "Lila, you know what I am. You saw what I did. You saw the gala." "I saw you," she countered, her voice soft but unbreakable. "I've seen the monster. And I've seen the man who sat by me in the dark. I'm not afraid of you, Dominic." "You should be," he whispered. "It's too late for that," she said. "I'm not asking for your world. I'm not asking for your name. I'm asking you not to send me away." He searched her face, looking for the lie, for the angle. He found none. He found only the raw, terrifying, beautiful truth. He had offered her an escape, and she had chosen the cage. He said nothing. He just walked to the window, his back to her, leaving her to stand alone by the fire. They returned to the penthouse 3 days later. It was dawn. The city was a vast, sleeping creature of glass and steel, awash in the pale, pre-dawn gray. Dominic hadn't spoken about her request. He hadn't said yes. He hadn't said no. He had just been. They had existed in the cabin, 2 solitudes, and now they were back in the glass tower. He was on the balcony, his arm in a black silk sling. He was staring at the skyline. Lila, wearing a fresh set of his clothes, walked out and stood beside him. The air was cold, and she wrapped her arms around herself. They watched as the sun began to bleed over the horizon, a single line of pink, then orange, then a flood of brilliant, heartbreaking gold. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He didn't look at the sunrise. He looked at her. He reached out his good hand, the right one, the one with the scarred knuckles, and he took her hand. His grip was not the ironclad grip of the boss. It was just a hand, holding hers, tightly. "My father," he said, his voice a low rumble, "was a fool. He trusted everyone. He believed in handshakes and honor. It got him a bullet in the chest in his own restaurant." He paused, his thumb rubbing the back of her hand. "My mother, she was the opposite. After he died, she trusted no one. Not me, not Matteo, not even herself. She lived in a prison of her own making. She died of a heart attack at 50, alone in a house full of people. Both of them, their trust and their lack of it It killed them. He finally turned, his body facing hers, his gray eyes raw in the new light. I haven't trusted a single human being. Not really. In 10 years. Not since my mother died. Trust is a weakness. It's a disease. It's the hole a knife goes into. Mateo proved that. Is that what I am? She asked, her voice small. A weakness? No, he said, his voice rough. That's the hell of it. I've been waiting for you to show your angle, for you to ask for the money, for you to be like them. He lifted her hand, the one he was holding, and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. But you're not. You're the only thing. You're the only person who isn't. You saw me, all of me, the animal, and you. You didn't run. You ran to me. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. I'm terrified of you. Lila. Good, she whispered, her own tears starting to fall. Now we're even. He kissed her. It was not the desperate, starving kiss of the kitchen. It was not the raw, claiming kiss of the bedroom. It was a kiss of arrival. It was slow. It was aching. It was a kiss of such profound, agonizing tenderness that it felt more intimate than any touch that had come before. It was a vow, a surrender. It was the end of the war and the first trembling breath of a new beginning. 6 months later, a small, unassuming building opened in a clean, quiet neighborhood. The sign over the door, in simple, elegant script, read, The Haven. It was a nonprofit, a shelter for women who had been erased, women who had fallen through the cracks, women who needed a place to become real again. It offered legal aid, tech training, and a warm, safe bed. Lila was in the main office, which was bright and full of plants. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue blouse. She was on the phone, her voice crisp, confident, and full of authority. No, that's not acceptable, she was saying. You tell Mr. Peterson at Atherton Gray that if he doesn't honor the settlement, my lawyers will be in touch. And this time, I won't be asking for money. I'll be asking for his job. She hung up, a small, satisfied smile on her face. Across the street, a black sedan was parked. Dominic sat in the back, his shoulder completely healed. He wore a suit, but his tie was loose. He watched her through the window, a look of profound, quiet pride on his face. He was the silent partner, the invisible funder, the guardian. This was her world, and he would let nothing, and no one, ever touch it. That night, he returned to the penthouse. It was late, past 10. He was tired, the weight of his new, legitimate world heavy on his shoulders. He let himself in, expecting the quiet, the dark. The light in the foyer was on. She was standing there, waiting for him, not in the dark, not as a ghost. She was at the door, a small, welcoming smile on her face. He stopped, his briefcase in his hand. You saved my life, too, you know, she said softly. He looked confused. Lila, I took a bullet for you. I know. No, she said, meant stepping toward him. You don't. I was a ghost. I was invisible. I was dead. Dominic, I just hadn't stopped breathing. You were the first person in 3 years who saw me. You gave me a life. You gave me something to fight for. She smiled, a radiant, brilliant thing. You made me real again. He dropped his briefcase. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. He didn't walk to her. He surged. He pulled her into an embrace so tight it stole her breath, his arms a cage of steel and velvet. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in. I'd burn the world for you. Lila, he whispered, his voice a raw, broken, perfect vow. I would burn it all to the ground, just to keep you safe. She just held him tighter, her face pressed against his chest, and in the doorway of the glass tower, high above the city that had tried to break them both, they stood, no longer the boss and the beggar, no longer the monster and the ghost, just partners, home. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We poured our hearts into this one, and we hope you felt every moment of Dominic and Lila's journey. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please, drop a comment and tell us what part of the world you're in. Your thoughts mean everything to us. What did you think of their story? Let us know in the comments. And if you loved this, please subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories. We have so many more for you.